on May 16th, 2024. Mr. Ehrlich is excused from tonight's meeting, and we are being joined by Mr. Ryer on the phone. Any public, or we need an approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting. Is anyone willing to make such a motion?
So moved. Second.
Alderman Newmeyer, seconded by Roger. Any questions or concerns on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Okay, motion passes. At this time, we'll go into public comments for what's on the agenda tonight. Your comments are welcome. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you need more time, please contact me to have potential items placed on the Planning Commission agenda. Are there any public comments or appearances tonight? Any public comments or appearances tonight?
My name is Paul Karlsky. I live in the town.
So Paul, I would need you to step up to the microphone. Yeah, there you go.
Hi, my name is Paul Karlsky. I live in the town of Port Washington. And I was calling about coming here today to find out if there's anything on the agenda that's coming up regarding the annexation of the town into the city of Port for those areas.
Yeah, so tonight, the agenda items are a conditional use grant, a municipal code, and a zoning code rewrite in our charter commission, but annexation is not on the agenda tonight or in the near future.
Okay.
Normally, we would not respond to comments like that, but that's a very popular inquiry lately, so I thought I'd give you the benefit of the doubt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any other public comments or appearances?
Push to turn on?
It's on.
It's on, okay. Just wondering if you could
If
define.
you could state your name and address for us for the record.
Address too?
Yep.
Okay. Ben Donikowski, 4799 County Road LL, Port Washington Township. Just wondering if you could define what near future means.
I can't because I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Feel free to contact us like in advance of meetings so that you can be in a better position for knowledge or what we would be talking about.
I want to, but I just found out about this recently myself.
Yeah, no worries.
I didn't know where this building was until today or yesterday. Evening, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
It's all very sudden.
Yeah, well, thank you. Any other public comments or appearances? Okay, we're going to move into our agenda item. Our first agenda item then is a conditional use grant, consideration and possible action on a request for a conditional use grant to allow outdoor eating and drinking at Cavalier Wine Bar at 407 East Jackson Street, 324 Lake Street, LLC, and Kelly Brown is the applicant. The issue is outdoor seating, which is included in your packet for the site plan and operations. Their staff recommends the approval of the conditional use grant request with the following suggestions. Days and hours of operation, Monday through Sunday, 11 to 10 p.m. Outdoor patio smoking is prohibited, and outdoor dining locations and seating shall be subject to the approved site plan provided as part of this conditional use grant. There are 4 more, and I'm sure Mr. Harris is going to tell us about them. So, Bob, it's on you now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be happy to. And so the subject business, Cavalier Wine Bar, has recently, or is in the process of recently opening up on the Newport Shores mixed-use condominium development, and this particular portion of the building is 407 East Jackson Street. It is going to be located at the northeast corner of the Newport Shores building. The primary use itself is a wine bar. Is
Sorry, Paul's
permitted.
public comments just ended.
Is
Forgot to turn
permitted.
off the alarm.
However, as the commission well knows, anything with outdoor eating and drinking is a conditional use, and both the property owner and the business owner have submitted an application for outdoor. Primarily outdoor drinking. And so these are the locations. There's actually 2 patios affiliated with for the wine bar. We have the south patio that's overlooking both the parking lot, but looking due east into the lake. And then the north patio is at the northeast corner of the building, and we see those locations in the slides. Real quick, the site plan, floor plan of the wine bar, the seating area, but those shaded areas in orange are those designated outdoor patio sites, which is the impetus for this conditional use. I think it's a fairly straightforward conditional use request. We're taking into consideration just similar conditions of the conditional use that we used for the Fork and Tap, which was, I think, the last outdoor dining conditional use for downtown. And then we also incorporated some of the provisions from the homeowner or the condo association in their narrative. That I think that's also included in your packet. And so the mayor read off the first three conditions, recommended conditions for approving the conditional use. And the remaining ones are simply just alcoholic beverages remaining in the patio areas. The conditional use is indefinite following the initial 12-month review after its first approval. And then just signage notifying customers or patrons that the alcoholic beverages are confined to the patios, and then the simple just refuse containers to prevent litter and debris. And with that, that's my recommendation. The next step after this would be the commission's recommendation to the council, and they would approve it during the month of June. With that, if anyone has any questions?
Any questions or comments on that? Looks like it'll be pretty neat. Oh, I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Mr. Mock. Any questions or concerns on the motion? With your staff recommendations. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Brings us to municipal code text amendment. Agenda item number 5 here, consideration and possible action to update Chapter 450 of the Port Washington Municipal Code relating to floodplain zoning. City of Port Washington is the applicant. The project in the background, the Plan Commission is being asked to provide a recommendation to the Common Council related to updating the city's current floodplain ordinance with a new model floodplain ordinance created by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Since Chapter 450 is located under land use legislation in the City of Port Washington Municipal Code, it is in need of a recommendation from the Planning Commission that is required. The issues are extensive, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think myself and Commissioner Strome will tag team on this item. The summation was pretty much covered in the project and background. So FEMA has completed updates to the floodplain maps in Ozaukee County. And as part of those map changes, all communities must adopt an updated floodplain zoning ordinances that meets new provisions, new state provisions, federal provisions, I think, of a floodplain ordinance that goes with these new mapping. The DNR supplied all the communities with a model zoning ordinance, which would meet the new requirements for any floodplain ordinance. And that is what the city would be adopting, and that is the extensive ordinance that's in your packet. It's been reviewed by our city engineer, who has actually more he has more experience in this matter than I do, and then it has been reviewed by the city attorney. The recommendation from staff is to adopt the model ordinance as presented, but I would defer to Commissioner Strome if he has any other comments regarding the model ordinance or just overall.
Just a little bit more background. We need to adopt this ordinance if we want to be in FEMA's flood insurance program, or actually, I mean, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, but that's essentially it. If it's really for the residents of the city that it provides them affordable flood insurance if they choose to buy it.
Okay. Because as a result of this, the city is in compliance with all of the other pieces. This is kind of like, because we've got 6 tankers, everybody's homeowner's insurance goes down because we've got enough fire coverage kind of thing, right?
Well, this is opposite of fire insurance, so this
No,
is.
no, I understand that,
But,
but like,
but essentially the
If
same
we don't
thing, same
have that
program.
many tankers, everybody's
Yeah.
home insurance goes up.
Correct,
This
yeah.
process and statutory alignment allows everything else, flood insurance to go down for residents.
Correct,
Or
yes.
be held.
Yes.
Okay.
And I mean, this is also where FEMA puts in the no development in the floodplain rules and stuff to incorporate
Yeah.
that, which is just good common sense.
100-year floodplains. Yeah, I read through this. It was unfortunately like when I was in college in my geography classes, like when does this end? But the high watermarks, perfect.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously the creek project's going to help with this a little bit too, so.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Roger or Bob?
Just one, will we have a map and overlay so we can show what the city, what encompasses any hazardous areas?
Yes, we do have new floodplain maps. They're rather, the easiest thing to do probably would be to look at them in Bob's office.
Okay.
I would add, thankfully, that there are not a lot of floodplains or properties in the floodplain in the city of Port Washington,
Very good. Thank you.
which is helpful.
Okay, so we would need a motion to make that recommendation up to the city council.
Correct.
I will make a motion to pass this as stated.
All right,
Second it.
moved and seconded. Eric, you have any questions?
I have no questions. The only thing that I would throw in there is if the map would be available on the city website at some point.
That's a good idea. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Brings us to agenda item number 6, zoning code rewrite. The discussion item tonight is a quarterly consult update to the Plan Commission on the City of Port Washington's zoning code rewrite. The project and background is we are currently in the process to rewrite the city zoning code. Since the contract with the city's consulting team was executed at the end of this past year, several tasks are now underway or upcoming, and I will let them speak to those. There is no action on this. This is for information. Buckle up.
Yes, strap them on. So real quick, as you all are aware, we are undertaking a complete rewrite of the city's zoning code. I might add that the dedicated zoning rewrite project webpage is now online, complete with the mayor's video describing the project and why. And we are now underway. Real quick of where we are with working with Grafe and Civitech, our zoning consultants. They are reviewing our current zoning code. We have since updated and is now current our zoning map. And now we are starting to conduct small group interviews with various stakeholders. In this case, for example, those groups or individuals that are familiar or have worked with our zoning code. And so we're interviewing architects, builders, brokers. Help me out here, Craig.
Yeah, other commissioners.
Members from our relevant boards and commissions, so CDA, Plan Commission, Harbor Commission, et cetera. And so those are currently underway, just starting this week. And then we now have our first of 4 quarterly meetings with the plan consultants. With that, I will just kind of hand it over to Craig from Grafe, and he will take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Commission. Craig Hebner. I am the practice team leader for Grafe's Planning and Urban Design team. This is the first of 4 quarterly Plan Commission updates that are planned for this 18-month-long zoning rewrite project. My hope with these, this is a discussion item. You know, I'm going to pose some questions and hopefully just hear some Q&A. Since this is the first one, it really is based more on how is your existing code operating right now, and I'll share a little bit about some other zoning trends that we as a consultant team see across many communities. And that's my hope kind of for the discussion tonight, is just to introduce maybe some different zoning ideas that you haven't thought of, but also hear from you as commissioners what's working well and what's not working well. Just from a project overview standpoint, as Bob mentioned, we're kind of at the beginning end of this project. It is an 18-month long process, but along the top here is kind of the different parts of the plan, including we already had our project kickoff. We're in the really code assessment standpoint. So us as a consultant team are looking at your current existing zoning ordinance, your zoning map, your zoning districts, the different uses, your approval procedures, and based off of our experience, what maybe is an outlier or doesn't maybe align with some best practices from that perspective. But after we get through this code assessment, we'll actually go into drafting different portions of your entire zoning code, including looking at your zoning map and is there a change in any designations, looking at your zoning districts, again, is there change to those, the uses listed within those, permitted and conditional and accessory. We'll look at in part 2 of different development standards, so how are lots sized, setbacks, building heights, more dimensional design-related items. And then part 3 of the draft zoning code update would be more administration and procedures. What gives staff the different powers that they have? What do you as a plan commission have for different powers in the council? As well as just the development community, what do they have to go through in order for different entitlements and approvals? On the bottom is the different engagement that the public will see. So right now, as Bob mentioned, we're just beginning different stakeholder group interviews. These are confidential interviews that allows us as a consultant team to really understand how your development and commission and other stakeholder communities feel about the code. We have an online survey that will come up in the next couple of months. Bob mentioned there's a website. Later on in the process, we'll have a community-wide open house for the residents of Port to really see what the draft code could start to look like, and then we'll go through the adoption process. So while this looks very linear and from beginning to end, this is really an iterative process. There's a lot to take in at the beginning here, and there'll be some back and forth as we're drafting different portions of the code, and there'll be a lot of back and forth with staff and you as a commission. But the goal at the end here is to have a very understandable, user-friendly code that can be flexible with market conditions, but also clear to your development community and you as a commission to truly regulate what we feel aligns with the vision of Port. I'm not going to read all these, and it's in your packet here too, but the RFP mentioned 19 different objectives of what we're trying to accomplish with this zoning code. Again, I'm not even going to go into these, but I would, say as we have a discussion here tonight, you could flip to this and look at, what city staff pulled together with your input as far as what this code should look like in the future. And then I'm going to stop talking here and we can get into these, but a consultant, Grafe, and then we're teamed with Civitech. We work on municipal codes throughout Wisconsin, different updates, and we see some different zoning trends that we like to introduce as different ideas. Some of these may be more familiar to you, and some of them may be less. But there's 11 different zoning trends that I list here. And again, I'm not going to go through them all. I'll just go to the first one to kind of show you what this looks like, and I'll kind of leave on this slide. But I'd love for discussion tonight to either, ask about some of these zoning trends or, again, hear from you as a commission on what you'd like to see with your zoning code update. But as an example here, one of these trends is to eliminate or reduce minimum parking requirements. So a lot of municipalities will actually have a very set minimum parking requirement for different uses. So say there's a large format retail, minimum you need to have X number of parking stalls per square footage of a building. This was a very common practice, but what some communities are looking at is really eliminating altogether or reducing those minimum requirements and allowing the development community to provide and prove that they are providing the sufficient amount of parking. And that is driven off of parking studies that those developers have done themselves or other best practice that we see in other communities.
So,
Yeah, please.
I was going to ask if I could ask a question,
Absolutely.
but I'd have to ask myself. With that, are zoning codes in suburban and growing communities, are they specifying, because I really appreciate the, no longer X amount of spots and then a shared responsibility for that. How do you put in zoning code a parking solution on your own property without, having an acre of blacktop?
I would say it's definitely dependent on where you are. So obviously downtown parking has been a huge topic of discussion as part of this. So I would say it's absolutely geographic and context based, where it doesn't sometimes make sense to have this approach in certain geographic areas, but in other, I would say more suburban, retail, commercial corridors. A lot of times a developer isn't going to provide, a commercial parking lot and not have enough parking for their customers because they know how many they want to see. And it'll very unlikely that it'll have a ripple effect to the surrounding adjacent context there in that solution. But downtown, I think is, it's a different story too.
And how are communities planning for the reduction in the volume of people who drive? So I just presented on this yesterday, weirdly, that 24-year-olds in the United States have only 81% of 24-year-olds have acquired their driver's license.
Yeah.
And that's like the first time ever in a generation that while there's been driving, that it's not closer to 98.
Yeah, so this would have ripple effects outside of zoning even specific, but it ties into more multimodal facility design. So are you requiring sidewalks on all of your public streets that are happening, looking at bicycle routes and bicycle facilities, whether they're on street or off street, how people are connecting to different areas. Transit comes into play as well as part of that solution for allowing people who don't have vehicles to actually still access your different areas. But that does relate to this kind of minimum or reducing parking requirements as well.
And then are communities putting in EV requirements in zoning in commercial and like in dense areas as well? Is that something you're addressing?
Yeah, EV and sustainability type zoning reform is absolutely something, and it could be its own kind of separate trend that isn't on here. And that can come in many different forms. In one of our stakeholder meetings actually today, the discussion was, could there be developer incentives for inclusion of sustainability design elements, such as, providing electric vehicle charging stations or a green roof or other sustainable elements that would provide for other
And
things
those
like
types
that.
of incentives would not be included in code. That would be policy, et cetera, right?
So it could be code, but could be also like, for specifically example, a residential development could have a density increase. Some communities will use this where if you are providing X amount of affordable units or X amount of a sustainable elements such as a green roof or something like that, they could have an increase in the amount of units that otherwise wouldn't be allowed for a traditional development.
okay,
So
that
it
way.
absolutely could be codified into your code there. It can absolutely be policy and financially driven separately as well, but it is something that can be built into code.
Yeah. I appreciate that because I think one of the pieces that Bob will be talking about next in our charter is in our own ordinances, we've got to put qualifying review dates so that we're not, if we put like that type of a piece in the code, the last time we reviewed the code was, my dad was a senior in high school.
Yep.
And he's young in his heart, but that's it. So like that, I would want to put some process in there that automatically triggered a review of those types of incentives because that may not be sensical.
Yep.
In a decade, technology is going to shift. So thank you. I'll stop my line of questions, but thank you.
No, and I think that's more or less where I wanted to stop, because I think again the question is, for discussion tonight, I'd love to hear, from each of you what's working well or what's maybe not working well with your zoning code, or just with approval procedures. You as a plan commission see a lot of obviously agenda items, so what in the code is not helping you or could be better, or with one of these different trends or what you've seen in other communities, what could Port consider? Yeah, Roger.
Craig, on this kind of following on sustainable code, is anybody putting in their codes that incentives if you follow like Envision development standards or LEED or some of those?
Yeah, I would say it's changing on what the actual entity, LEED is a very specific one, so it's always changing what the rubric, is for sustainable, gold level. So I would say it's more along just general sustainable practices, that not necessarily if you meet LEED, then you get X, but if you're achieving a certain sustainable elements such as, again, like a green roof or, you know, bicycle parking, you know, as part of your parking lot. That's where it starts to ripple into some of these zoning ordinances, yeah. Yeah. And I would maybe ask too, you know, there's two questions on sustainability. Is that, you know, a clear direction or desire that you as a commission would see wanting to be infused, you know, into your code for consideration?
I think we've been remiss, and I've been on the longest, unfortunately, but I think we've been remiss compared to other communities. We should have something, at least providing some guidance for
Yeah.
businesses and homeowners. And then I'd add to that, as far as the code goes, I think sometimes we don't get public information out enough, the way our system is designed, so people can look at our Facebook page or our web page, and they can see right there what they have to do and not be calling staff, asking questions where they could see it right there. I took a call today from a gentleman, and he didn't realize some things I had explained to him, and then I directed him to our website. Thank you.
This is one of those comments I don't know how to articulate, so I'm just going to say it. I'd really like and we've talked about this from the start, but as you're going through the code, I'd like it to be really tight so that this body, and I've said this since I started, just calls balls and strikes and doesn't invent new rules along the way. And we're not up here talking about potato vines to cover, you know, cement walls kind of stuff. Like, just very clear and tight so that it doesn't even come to us unless it's a significant, unique variance need. And that it just kind of stops at the city planner's desk, that this is the law. Yes, you have these rights, but it's unlikely that we're going to change it because we've reviewed it. Our current code has so many variables and it's so wide that it's hard to be consistent and then setting weird precedents all of the time. So,
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
I was gonna say almost exactly slightly different. I was gonna say, yeah, more black and white, less gray. Because, yeah, since I've started, unlike the gentleman over there, Commissioner Paul, that's been the longest, I'm the newest one, and since I've started, that's been our focus, is to be, I'll say, more proactive. Let's get it done, let's get ahead of everything so that we're not having to make these judgment calls when something comes and then, you know, we're playing favorites or not favorites. It's not what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to so be more proactive, more black and white with this rewrite and,
Right.
you know, make it easier for everybody.
And I think just to add that or example, Bob has been working quite a bit with us to make our building heights uniform. As the mayor said, we don't want to call balls and strikes anymore when people are coming in. Well, we've got this 20-story building we want to build, but our code is not really explicit on what we want. So that building heights is a good example. We have to really just make that very regimented. Thank you.
Can you give us a brief synopsis of what is coming out of the focus groups? That's actually within our purview. I'm sure there was all kinds of like, hey, please make sure we don't have a Ferris wheel kind of thing, but like that's actually relevant for us.
Yeah. So it's very fresh on my mind because today was actually the
Yeah.
first of a couple of these. And I will share what's interesting is when you talk about, you know, more clear yes and no, with one of the stakeholder groups, there was discussion of actually appreciating the city's design kind of back and forth. And that was both from a staff and from your design review board perspective that was mentioned. I think it also kind of carried over a little bit to the Plan Commission. So I think there'll be a balance of how we, you know, do make it clear as far as what the yes, no answers are. But from this stakeholder group's perspective, there was the appreciation that there was some design creativity and back and forth discussions that was still desirable to be had there. From the approval procedures and length, you know, I think we didn't hear, at least I haven't heard anything yet from stakeholders that it's overly cumbersome as compared to other communities, which is always, I think, something good to hear. I would say we heard a couple comments about your staff being good staff to work with, which is not always the case as well. So I think that's a big kudos to that perspective as well. One other comment maybe that was kind of reoccurring today with a couple conversations was ensuring that the zoning code can be adaptive to market conditions. So the question was, is Port, defined as a, aging in place community right now, and what will be that in 10 years, and will our code be able to still be accommodating of maybe a different market that is not the boomers that we're kind of maybe accommodating for right now with some of the residential development. So I would say, and our response to that is a lot of these guidelines and regulations, we're exploring things like form-based design, which allows for multiple uses within more of, again, a design standard that we can all agree on. And that's not only building, it's how blocks and sites get developed as well. So I think that was kind of at least some of the highlight items. I don't know if that raises any questions or thoughts.
Excuse me, any other thoughts or questions? We get to see him every 45 days, so. All right.
I would
awesome.
say there's a fair amount in here, and I gave you hard copies, and I can follow up with digital too. But please, as you're digging into this or thinking about your zoning code, reach out to Bob or reach out directly to me, because we are in this kind of next couple of month process of trying to really absorb all the current data in order for us to start making some consultant recommendations and drafts of different sections.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
If I could hop in, I do have a couple thoughts.
Sure, go ahead, Eric.
Yep, I was just going to see, we've been talking about signage and building heights for a couple of years. Are those a couple of goals that would come out of this project to be resolved? And then also, I would agree with the comments before about trying to minimize the amount of exceptions that come to the Plan Commission as opposed to variances that would have to go to the Common Council, so that we don't have kind of a regular stream of exceptions. We haven't had as many lately, but minimizing that coming to the Plan Commission, I think, would be a good practice.
Yeah, thank you for that comment, and I would say yes, signage code is absolutely part of this and included in your zoning ordinance that we're looking at, as well as specifically your building heights will also be explored. I know downtown has obviously been the hot topic and conversation back and forth there, so that is information that we have and will be part of this as well. I will say I know there's been a lot of discussion on specifically the building height, but we will be looking very specifically at your downtown and block by block and even parcels within blocks, I think, to really truly make sure that we come to the right solution on building heights.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. All right. Last thing for you then is make sure you spend your meal per diem in town at a locally owned restaurant.
That sounds great. I'd be happy to.
There's a few good ones. All right. Well, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
All right. The next agenda item then, the next agenda item is agenda item number 7, looking at the Plan Commission Charter and possible action on approving the Plan Commission Charter. The background on this is per our strategic plan, each of the boards and commissions and committees is supposed to adopt a charter that is going to guide the work for the entire year. And it should have objectives and goals in it of what we want to do over the course of the year in addition to the responsiveness of what a planning commission does. So what we would want to make sure that we are addressing, we are working on, and that the giving guidance to Bob as the director of planning for his work for the year to ensure that we hit those targets. So, Mr. Harris, would you like to begin?
Yeah, let me just start off by saying, taking into account what we discussed at the last month's meeting, some of those specific comments that you gave me, they didn't, I don't know if they fit into the charter per se, but I just want you to know that I did take note of them, and I will be, taking those into my practice for future meetings. Those are the things that you all gave me, for example, just the small things regarding the plus delta forms. It was just kind of a layout of the report. I think I'd have to go back to my notes, but those specific things, if they're not reflected in the charter, which is a little more bigger and broader ones, don't just remember that I will be taking those into my practice. And so just going off of that and putting together just a draft charter for you all, The idea is to, we're kind of in May. I wanted something a little more manageable to take into account and maybe and get accomplished. So I identified 3 really strategic goals for this year for the Plan Commission, some of these that will carry forward, if not all of them. So strategic goal 1 is really, and this is what going off of the mayor's preferences about having KPIs identified and being tracked. So just that in and of itself is a strategic goal for 24 and going forward. And then as far as what the KPIs would be, near the end, I do have what those measures, those are kind of in the measures of successes. And I didn't want to just get into, the Plan Commission, just an inventory of what we've done. I didn't want to get into, we did 5 CFSMs, 7 rezonings, and 10 new building additions, anything like that. That doesn't really tell us much, in my opinion. So what I wanted to focus on was building permit values. Tracking those is just a measure of economic activity in the city. Plan recommendations that we've actually implemented, and those would primarily be from our downtown plan and from the relatively recent land use update that we completed in 21. And then lastly, total assessed value citywide. Again, just a barometer of the strength and economic activity of the city that we can chart both on a yearly year over year, and then started establishing trend lines. And so those are the 3 performance indicators that I've identified, and I'll let the commission discuss those if needed to be. Number 2 strategic goal is just kind of dovetailing with what we just had with the last presentation, is making sure the zoning code rewrite is on schedule, and that is within 60 days of schedule. I think that might be, that's calling around. When we started the rezoning process, what was this, mid last year, just when I was getting, calling around to different communities that have just recently begun or just recently completed their own rewrites. Most of them we're about 6 months behind or so. I think we can stay on target within 60 days. And so I think that's just a realistic goal. I don't see us going beyond 90 days, 6 months, a year, like some communities have for various reasons. I think, we're staffed. We have an engaged committee, commission, and council. And we have a kind of a veteran consulting group, so I think we'll be good with that. And then lastly, the last strategic goal, the 3rd one that at least I identified, and it's kind of you would think it's a basic one, but it's kind of making sure that our official zoning map is updated continuously. So each time a rezoning comes through and is approved, we get to go in with our GS mapping and just change that map then and there as well as the land use plan. It's sometimes those kind of get a little lag behind where we are currently, but that's an important update to keep both internally and for appraisers and developers. And that's just something we should be doing. And that is what I had as far as strategic goals, and then the measures of success I've already touched on. With that, I'll open it up to the commission, and we can have at it a bit.
Oh, that sounded a little aggressive, but any questions or concerns or comments for Bob? So, Bob, I have a couple of things that I wanted you and us to consider here as we move forward. Under the key performance indicators, one of the things I'm wondering if where the Planning Commission feels on this is, so we've got building permit values, plans recommendations implemented, and total assessed value citywide. What is everyone's thoughts on, because of Bob's responsibilities about the development initiated, developed, and completed by him and his office. So, as a city planner and director of planning, how much are we driving as a city of going out and getting people, you've got this vacant property, you've got a dilapidated property, Bob initiating, doing those components instead of the reactionary pieces for the city, because that ties into your other ones of total assessed value and other components. So this was my canceled meeting, so.
Yeah. So it's kind of a tough one because I've always felt that, I know some cities do that where, hey, we have this vacant lot. At the same time, have we seen was, say, the property on Seven Hills Road that sat there for 20 years being owned by a very good local real estate realty firm. And they've been marketing it locally, regionally, even nationwide as it is still sat there. So sometimes I think what developers or companies or businesses look for, I think they do this for a living. And so a lot of it is driven by them. And, we can go and say, hey, here's a property, but I'm not sure, how effective that is, because if they're looking, they will find, when I say businesses. And then at the same time, do we want, and then we have to target it towards a use that we want. And I don't think there's going to be a scoreboard effect. I think it's kind of an open-ended, and there's still so much that's out of our control when trying to recruit or develop a site.
Yeah, and I guess for me, respectfully, I disagree. I look at what the Village of Grafton does, and the Village of Grafton drives their development. I mean, when Sam's Club comes and says they want to put a Sam's Club, we're thinking of doing that. They go recruit Costco. When Kohl's expands, they're very intricate in the drive of that. So I understand that those components, but I think Port Washington is in a better position now to kind of develop what the city would want opposed to just what developers would want, and Didier's shifted that property around through a conversation that we had about do you think we could maybe get that done? Come and ask, because it had sat vacant. And I think my expectation is the city's a little more creative with some of the design and development so that we are not in the reactive mode and we're not being told this is going to happen on this property where, we're sparking that. And that's the part of the charter component that, that's my wondering is what are we sparking, designing and developing? We've got multi, let's take the industrial park, and I'm not saying it was your responsibility, but, we get a little flare up because we put warehousing in there. And, what are we doing to be more proactive as a city to ensure that we're attracting, long-term, high-value pieces that offset residential property taxes so that we have greater value in our development. When Simplicity, Boland's, Modern close, value drops, my property taxes shoot up. Not shoot, but they go up. So that's just my wondering is that, how do we create that? And in the charter, Bob, if that's not something that you can do alone, then what would that need to look like as we go into budgeting so that we could be more successfully driving vacant property and redevelopment within the city of Port Washington?
I don't know if you recall when the city did, I think this was in the 90s, late 90s, where they did an economic development plan, and they identified the handful of properties that they'd like to see redeveloped.
Yeah.
And then those properties are still largely there. And so as far as prioritizing, I think we know what the sites are. And it's just a matter of focusing, city actions, be it land use, zoning, or something at the council level of targeting, this is our goal for, this is our short-term goal, midterm goal for these properties. And we kind of did that in the downtown plan, with the Jade Air site, not to mention I think there were 6 more others. And so the idea of prioritizing certain sites, I think we're starting to do that with the recent planning efforts. I think we just have to flesh that out a bit more so what that looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I get, we are plan rich. What I want to see now in these charters is execution of those plans, right? So, we executed on the property to the west side of town. We did that. You were instrumental in the RFP, the design and development. That is now going to be the development that, maybe what the council had envisioned, density, a beautiful entryway to Port Washington. We go to the south side of Port Washington now. We don't own any of those properties, but watching the models around the region, and especially to the south, where there are property owners who want to start to design and develop over there, I'd like us to be more aggressive in executing those pieces. Same thing with the downtown plan. I mean, if the safety center does move to the west side, that vision for that current property is really good, but the city would have to execute versus waiting for some developer to come in and say, yeah, I like what you did and what your community said they would tolerate, but now I want to do this.
See, now I think we're meeting on common ground because we're using the plans that we have.
Correct.
And now, and those plans have sites identified. So now, yes, and that would I see that through the lens of plan implementation. Absolutely.
And that's why I'm suggesting the KPI around what you initiated, your department initiated, what was developed, and then what was closed, and then how that impacts total evaluation for the city, supporting future, infrastructural support on our capital things. Like, where do the revenues come from if we are not actively, as a city, looking to either refurbish, redesign, or develop things that we know are in our comprehensive plans? Because if we sit and wait, we're going to sit and wait. And I think Port Washington.
If I could jump in,
Go ahead, Eric.
is maybe one way to look at it instead of trying to keep a scoreboard of how many active wins that Bob would go out and get, maybe trying to minimize the number of times developers come in and want to do something that's completely contrary to the planning that the city's done and all the studies that have been done.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that too, but again, we would have to have rich enough code to be able to stop a landowner in their tracks. So, I mean, I didn't want to argue tonight. I want to think about that before we adopt it, because the other one is under strategic goals. I'm wondering about identifying an infrastructural plan and review of needs on the north and south side of what is currently the city of Port Washington for water, streets, and what that would look like, because I know we're going to face pressure, especially on the south side, to start to develop areas that are annexed into the city. We redid our ordinance that you have to have sewer and water. So some property owner, a mile south of where our pipes end, like, we should know what that's going to cost and what to do and how we would do pay as we go for those developments. So I'd rather have those things kind of in the can. And I don't know if that's a public works and city planner piece.
Yeah, it is. And we've been discussing this in the, in the basement.
And I know there's a study taking place for the south side for water and everything, but as a city, it would be nice to be proactive, because I was on council a gajillion years ago when we built that huge water tower for the future VK development. Still not there, right? But now there's water on the south side of town. It's just, there's nowhere for it to flow past that, so.
No, good. I once it's through the lens of plan implementation, I think that's where we can really do something, and then put that into the charter. Yeah.
And then the only other one, Bob, that I wanted, and I don't know where it fits in the charter, or if, to your point, if it just goes under our behaviors, is when a project or a development closes out, what I'd like is kind of like, and I don't know if this is selfish, but like just in our packet, it doesn't even have to be for discussion, but just the property at 123 Main Street was now permitted and open and met all expectations of the planning commission. Because like, property owners will say, like, you made me plant oak trees, nobody ever came and looked at them.
Yep.
Right? So it would be kind of nice for that loop to close, and then a recognition for us that, the time and effort that is put in, we see that.
Yep, and that was brought up, last month, and that's one of the notes I made, yes.
Okay. Anyone else have anything? Eric, anything else?
Nope, just the loop closure that you just mentioned. That's all I had.
Okay. So Bob, if you don't mind, would you mind just kind of reflecting on that feedback and we'll bring this back next month?
Yep, I was just
Action?
going to suggest that.
Okay. All right. Anything else from anyone else on that piece? Okay, well, with that, folks, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned. Go Pirates.